What's going on, homies? Always good to see you. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about compulsiveness, patterns, and running flowcharts, and how this applies. How this philosophy from fighting games also has deep applications in our own like personal lives and stuff as well. And it's funny how like inspiration can come from weird places, right? But like when you look into stuff or you have like a passion for something, even if on the surface it doesn't necessarily seem like it would be related to anything else, you can make these weird connections and stuff, right? And I think that's kind of what happened for me today, man. As I was watching a video made by a content creator in the fighting game space named Brian F, and he was talking about the flowchart mentality that like people in online matches and even tournament players and stuff can sometimes get into, where a person comes into a match with a pre-canned strategy. They already know the wheel of choices and exactly what they're going to do, and they're basically playing a one-player game. You know, they're not interacting with the opponent on an active basis, like on an in the moment basis. They're coming in knowing what they're going to do, and they're going to run their game plan regardless. And I think it's interesting because there's positive and negatives in it. I don't want to say it's all bad, right? Because on the positive end, when you do that, you free up your cognitive load, right? Pause. you free up mental space, like when you're not actively thinking about like every little detail in the match or like every little movement that's happening, then it's much easier for you to just to I guess be free in a sense, where it's much easier for you to not think. You don't have to go through the trouble of actually engaging with what you're dealing with, because you're like caveman mode, right? And you're like, I'm gonna play my game regardless. They're gonna do whatever they do, and there's a simplicity to it, and if you're going through like a tournament especially, and you don't have to expend any more energy than that to beat someone, then that's a good thing, because then you can save your energy, you can save all that mental space and all that other extra stuff for later on fights, because you got a long road ahead of you, right? You got a lot more opponents, a lot of other stuff happening, so it can be good in that sense that it's a lot less energy expenditure when you're running a game plan like that. But what ends up happening is that when somebody is strictly a flowchart player, when that flowchart doesn't work, they self-destruct. Like they explode. Like they don't know what to do, right? Like if somebody has the answer to their game plan, if somebody is actively engaged in the game, they know the strategy and they know the counter and they know what you're trying to pull, then you can't do it. And if you're not in the state of mind to see that your flowchart's not working, or if you never worked on a strategy outside of the flowchart, you're in for a bad time, bro. Like it's not gonna be a good look for you, right? So what ends up happening is that it destroys flexibility, like it completely takes the flexibility and the active and engaging nature of what a fighting game and stuff is out of the picture, and that's an extremely bad thing. Inflexibility breeds defeat, basically. And what I was getting at with that, man, is that like not only is this something that applies for fighting games, but also it can be a direct parallel to what happens in our personal lives and stuff as well, right? Where we can be, as humans, really compulsive creatures. We can get stuck in our ways and habits of doing things, like always talking to the same people, going to the same places, having the same conversations. And while it can be comforting to do this, what ends up happening is it destroys growth. It destroys our ability to become more than what we are. It destroys like our potential and like what possibilities are out there for us when we decide that we're going to be stuck strictly within these patterns, and I don't want to make it seem like patterns are evil, because they do have their place. Like we're as it was stated to me, man, as I was taught, Like, we're born out of patterns, like the patterns of the moon and things like that dictate like the female menstrual cycle, which then dictates our birth and like when we're going to be born. And just, it gets really esoteric and philosophical like that, right? But it's true, man. Like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with patterns or compulsiveness, except when you completely allow it to rule your life, because when compulsiveness become something that it's the only way that you interact, or you let it dictate your actions, then you can become a really dangerous human being. You give in constantly to things, into pleasure, basically. If compulsiveness is your god, basically, if you get stuck into the easy way of doing things, or you get stuck into these patterns, then what starts to happen is that like the easy road becomes your favorite thing. Like, you start to look for the simplest way out, or the easiest way out of doing nearly everything, because if you found that it works and you're not consciously there for your own life, it's like going on autopilot. That's exactly what it is. Where, I don't know if you guys have had this feeling before, but I have, man, where I felt like I was like going through the motions, or like autopiloting my own life, where I basically, like, I wake up, go to work, come back home, eat, blah, blah, blah. And like, it was just felt like the same thing every day. And I felt like detached from my own existence, and in a lot of ways, that's one of the biggest hells that we can go through, is like feeling trapped within your own skin. Like, there's not a lot worse than that, man. Is when you don't even like yourself and in your own way of life. And I think that this is what compulsiveness and lack of consciousness breeds. When there's a lack of awareness about the way that we're doing things, or about the way that we're running our lives, this is, I think, the inevitable end when we don't pay attention. We get stuck in these ruts, we get stuck in these pitfalls, and just these ways, these traps, like these traps that keep us just stuck and stagnant and like not happy. But the dangerous part is that it's not always something that people change, and you would think that, oh, well, if I'm feeling stuck, or if I'm like feeling just kind of like whatever about my life, like, of course I would want to do something. And not necessarily, because there's comfort in it, and there's a lot of people out there that would rather, like, there's that old saying with going with the devil, right? But it's extremely true that there are people who would rather stick with the terrible situation that they know than deal with the worry and anxiety that comes with entering a new situation that could be better, but that they don't know. And I think that this is where trying to get out of autopilot when necessary comes in, like, not telling you that you have to constantly be hyper vigilant and like on edge and like looking over your shoulder and that kind of stuff. Like, not at all, man. Like, I don't think that life should be like that. You shouldn't always feel like you're on edge, or like you're extremely hyped up. But I think awareness, and as much awareness as you can allow yourself to muster, is a beautiful and a significant thing. Because if you're fully able to engage with everything that you interact with, if you fully engage in every single moment that's presented to you, I think there's a lot more possibilities that potentially open up when we experience life that way. Like, imagine if like every conversation you had, you were fully engaged to the point where you were talking to that individual like it's the last time you're going to talk to them, like, not that you got to be weird or just like, I love you so much, like, I just don't know if we're going to talk again. Not like literally, right? Like, you don't got to be weird about it, but just giving them that sort of, that respect, that sincerity, that energy, that attention, that focus, like giving all of yourself to whatever you're doing or whatever person you're with at that specific moment, really breeds results, and a lot of surprising results, man, in ways that we may not expect, to be honest. And I think that this lesson that I've learned from like playing like fighting games, and the importance of like awareness and engaging with my opponent rather than engaging with my own thought process about what I want to do, right? Where you're like, I want to hit this sick combo, and like trying to force it and then getting my ass kicked, because instead of actually fighting my opponent, I was like fighting myself and like my own fantasies. I think being able to take my lessons from that and then seeing how that applies to just everything else is a beautiful thing, man. I think it's real. I think it's significant. I think if we have the ability, like I know that we all have the ability to break out of like our unconscious compulsive patterns, and I think that we owe it to ourselves to do that, because it's, to me, I think it's the only way that we're going to ever be able to become something greater. You know, I think it's the only true way to grow is to fully engage with whatever it is that you find significant. And when you do that, things happen, man. But it's not as easy as it sounds, you know? Like, I don't want to make it sound like this is just like the simplest thing ever, because on the surface, I think it can be misconstrued like that. But giving sincere focus and concentration to everything that you do can be so hard, man. It's not easy, but I think it's necessary, right? Because there are some things that are completely necessary for us that aren't gratifying like right in the moment, but if you don't do them, then the future becomes hell. You know, if you don't do it, then the possibilities afforded to you later are, they're much more limited. And I think that that's why we have to learn to like move past, like in the previous videos, I've talked about instant gratification, right? I think that's why it's so important for us to have to learn to move past patterns, compulsiveness, and instant gratification. Because if we want what lies on the other side of that, if we want to become bigger and better and like more expanded versions of ourselves than we are now, I think that that's truly what it takes. You know, I think that's the toll to pay. So that's just kind of my thoughts, man. Just playing video games are like, look, the fighting games, man, they expand your brain. Get out there, play some Tekken, play some Street Fighter, whatever it is, Guilty Gear, whatever you like to play, man. But it's inspiration can come from weird places. So as always, appreciate you guys for hanging out with me, man. Be good out here, and I will talk to you in the next video.